AI is changing the nature of physical threats by analyzing publicly available data such as satellite imagery, floor plans, social media activity, and employee movement patterns. Attackers can simulate patrol routes, identify surveillance blind spots, and map access points to bypass physical security measures. These tactics are fueling a rise in non traditional incidents like drone enabled attacks and unauthorized perimeter entry. So, the conversion of cyber and physical risk has been acknowledged for years, but artificial intelligence is now accelerating that shift in ways that demand urgent attention. What was once a theoretical overlap has become a real and rapidly evolving threat landscape. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Now, AI is enabling new forms of physical disruption, from the misuse of autonomous drones and deep fake enabled access breaches to the sabotage of building management systems. These are no longer future risks, they are happening now across industries and geographies. Joining us today is Vinod Babu, Group Chief Executive Officer, Blue Cloud Softech Solutions, to explore the growing shift towards unified security architectures that bring physical and digital asset protection together within a single framework. Hi, Vinod. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Priya. Thanks for having me here.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast today, Vinod. And of course, a lot of things are happening when we talk about the integration of AI in terms of security, where probably we will be discussing both the pros and cons today. So, let's start by building the foundation by letting our listeners understand more about Blue Cloud Softech Solutions, its specialization, and along with that, we would also like to know more about you, Vinod. You have over 24 years of leadership experience across telecom, cybersecurity, AI, and you are recognized as a transformative technology leader driving innovation at scale. So, more about you and also about your role towards the company.
Sure, Priya. Good evening, all listeners. I'm Vinod Babu here. I'm the Group Chief Executive Officer of a company called Blue Cloud Softech Solutions, which is an AI technology provider. Company is basically focused on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and cloud services. Majorly, the initiatives of Blue Cloud is focused on a Make in India, building the security and safety surveillance platforms, which are completely indigenous in nature and also Make in India product, which could serve not just for a civilian purpose, but also for the law enforcement agencies as well as for the defense put together. So the major focus areas of Blue Cloud is identifying air gap networks, especially in the physical infrastructure, and building the solutions. So in terms of, because most of the systems work in silos, so we need to have one integrated platform which can actually provide the deep insight about how exactly my physical access control is being worked, logical access control is, and by and large, how exactly this is integrating with artificial intelligence enabled platforms which are being used in the enterprise sector. So, focusing this, we have developed platforms like AccessGenie is a facial recognition based surveillance platform, which is used basically for industrial automation, right from identifying the workers at the industry, access control management, and also their placements within the plant, and also monitoring their work performance and integrating that with an ERP platform is one of the key features that we have for AccessGenie. And AccessGenie is being deployed especially for the with the drone integration for the law enforcement agencies as well as for the defense agencies, where this is useful in terms of doing surveillance as well as surveying the area. Especially when you talk about the physical infrastructure systems like power line systems, where this drone-based surveillance systems can actually monitor and measure the security. And then we have Blura Saga, which is another tool core focused on social media monitoring, identifying and escalating any of the violations that takes place on the social media based on the sentiment analysis and goodwill analysis. So, especially in the sentiment analysis, identifying specific sentimental tone, and may be related to a government, may be related to an individual, any type of exploitation that takes place over the internet, where negative comments are being written, or maybe some kind of postings are being done. So it's really a challenging task, a mammoth task now, where to go to take this content down. This is a million-dollar question. So to address that, we have come up with this Blue Saga platform, which basically identifies any of the negative content which is being written on an individual or maybe on an enterprise or maybe on a specific government. And then this just doesn't stop there, but also further it can initiate the notices, serving the notices and pursuing to take down that content if it is a negative content that has been cited. Similar to that, we have other products which is into AI healthcare, majorly focused on population health management and community health management, and we have products which are majorly concentrating on the dark web monitoring, where any of the breached data or breached credentials or any of the equipment related breached design information, all of this has been constantly monitored, because the dark web is one of the challenging areas of the internet, especially identifying now from where exactly the source of the origination of the content breach has taken place, or any kind of a violation or maybe a cyber attack has taken place. Investigating over the dark web is a challenge, for which we have developed a product called as Blue Tor. So Blue Tor is a product which now identifies from entry node to the hidden services directories to the guard node and to the exit node. Each one of this now how exactly the point-to-point packet connection has gone, and who has started this connection or established this connection and posted the content. So these kind of intrinsic investigations can be done. And also, it has built in with cryptocurrency related fraud investigation, financial fraud investigation, and also bank related fraud information. Especially the biggest concern that we have is digital arrests. So in India, so which is one of the areas that we focused, especially as a part of the Blue Tor. So to give you a brief insights about myself, so almost it's 30 years now. I've been into information security or overall and into IT, and then subsequently into information security, telecom, and cybersecurity today. So core, being these many years in the industry, especially in the security domain, so it made us given us a deeper insights, like what is the requirement exactly that we have, and where exactly the industry versus the technology availability gaps that are there. What kind of a technology is required to be developed to match the pace of the artificial intelligence. So based on this, we have set the vision and focused on it. And we also developed an AI chip, which is a semiconductor chip, which does the edge computing over the camera, from each CCTV camera at the edge level itself, so that the AI processing would become easier. So that's an overview about the company and myself, Priya.
That's a fantastic overview, Vinod. And I think this context is really important as we move forward, because it lays the foundation for some of the bigger themes we will explore, especially around security, innovation, challenges, and what lies ahead. So, building on that, now today's forward thinking business owners are no longer keeping their cyber and physical security strategy siloed. Instead, they are bringing the two together, slashing risks to security and efficiency in the process. Now, physical security and cybersecurity have long been treated as separate concerns. Gates, guards, and alarms on one side, then we have firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and antivirus software on the other. There's just one problem: it doesn't make sense, because now, when a digital and physical worlds are more connected than ever, keeping them both separate has been pretty much challenging for a lot of organizations. So, Vinod, what according to you is driving the conversion of physical and digital security, and why is this shift becoming critical now?
Excellent question, Priya. So before actually I give an explanation to this, I would like to ask the listeners as well as you visualize a situation where you have a home, and this home has two doors, a front door and back door, right? So, and then you have a perimeter, which is a compound wall, and the gate, and before the gate you have a security guard. Let's assume that. So typically, when you have an entry and exit, so you have a clear monitoring at one point, where you have a security guard who would be actually monitoring who is coming in, going out, and you have a door with an access control management system with a password lock or home automation system, whatever it is. So which will actually record who is coming in, and then the exit will point again. Now who is going out, right? So having said this, think of a situation when you have a home with the number of doors are going to be 65,535 doors. So 65,535, this number belongs to the number of logical ports that you have on a computer system. So which is technically what we call it as the logical ports. Whenever you establish a connection, for example, open a Chrome browser and open multiple windows over there. So each of those windows or those tabs are connecting to one individual website, right? Technically, it's going, taking an exit from your door of your computer and connecting to some other. Like this, you can establish 65,535 connections at any given point in time with your computer. Then what kind of a security do you need? So the physical security wise, now when you do a correlation, the security guard is like a firewall and compound wall is your router and the access control list that you implement on each one of the networks, and the access gate or biometric or any kind of access control mechanism for the main door is something now equivalent to an identity access management platforms that are there, right? So this physical systems which are being silos because they use a different kind of protocol, right? And IT environment uses different kind of protocols. OT environment, operational technology environment uses different types of network protocols as well as data communication protocol. Because of this, each one of them were in silo, and they thought hackers or the attackers wouldn't be focused on this physical systems or any of these OT systems, right? But when you look at it, if you check, visiting as websites like showthem.com. Now, when you go there and type any particular brand, let's say Philips or Siemens or any of the world example. Now, for example, any of these brands, when you type, you'll be finding a lot of devices which are now there in and around you, which are connected to internet, were visible. Those device owners will never come to know that these are exposed to internet, right? In this case, what happens is physical security is exposed. It's very important right now to have this convergence of bringing everything under one umbrella. That's what is are under one wings of one falcon, that is cybersecurity. So that's where this convergence is moving towards. And now, whatever way back in 1990s, we have seen like Terminator 2 kind of movies, like where you have a machine-to-machine kind of a communication protocols, which turned out to be true today. So this kind of exploitations are happening. So we see that the cars are getting hacked, see that drones are getting hacked. So everywhere there's an exploitable chances that are being increasingly high today because of using this communication protocol. So cybersecurity, OT security, and IT security put together comprises what we call it as in cybersecurity arena today. And that's where the convergence of physical systems, whether it is in HVAC systems, where heating, ventilation, and air conditioning kind of a system, which are there in the industries, which are again exposed to the internet or any of the networks. So they all need the security. That's where IT security would come in picture.
That's a fascinating perspective, Vinod, and it really highlights how the boundaries between the physical and digital worlds are no longer as distinct as they once were. And, as we are seeing a sheer rise in connected devices, smart buildings, IoT connected systems, I think organizations are now dealing with a much larger and more complex attack surface, and managing these risks separately just doesn't cut it anymore. And I think as we move forward, it's clear that the future of security lies in integration, collaboration, and a more holistic approach to risk management.
That's right.
Great. Having said that, we discussed that the landscape of cybersecurity is evolving at an unprecedented rate. And, it's compelling organizations to rethink their defense strategies against these sophisticated threats. Now, unified security platforms stand out as a compelling alternative to traditional solutions because they promise enhanced integration, automation, and real time analytics elements that can significantly bolster an organization's security posture. So, how would you define a unified security architecture, and how does it fundamentally differ from the traditional approaches?
Unified architecture versus traditional when you look at it. So as we discussed earlier, each one of these technologies, whether it is physical or OT technology or maybe IT technology, each one of them they were working in silos. In now it's time right now because of this unprecedented growth. So we need to bring a kind of a single pane of glass framework. So where your physical telemetry as well as the digital telemetry. So what do I mean by physical telemetry? Physical telemetry could be your video feeds that you get from CC cameras, or could be the access logs that you get from biometric, or could be an RFID, whatever it is. And digital telemetry is something like you talk about the network traffic, right? That's example. And also each one of the endpoints, your laptops, you could be your iPads, your mobile phones, any of it. Everything is being tracked under the EDR solution. This EDR solution, network monitoring solution, and CCTV monitoring solutions or camera feed monitoring solutions, access control mechanism solutions. All of this need to be brought under one umbrella, where basically the traditional silos, where identifying this blind spot, where exactly the data is actually moving out of the eye, where monitoring eye. So it need to be identified, and this can be only possible when you bring all of them under the single pane of the glass. And more importantly, when you look at it, to bring an unified approach, it is very important to implement this ZTNA kind of frameworks, which is what we call it as zero trust application frameworks, like where ZTNA and zero trust principles across both domains. It treats like an interaction in a person walking through a door or packet that is entering into the system or into the network as potentially a risk, equal risk. That's what now a unified approach talks about. So zero trust on both of this, either a person coming into the premises or a data packet coming into the premises. This is where when you look at this zero trust model, you can actually implement the security architecture, unified security architecture for you.
Definitely, Vinod, and I think that's a pretty powerful way to look at it. I think that this unified security architecture shifts the mindset from reactive protection to a more proactive orchestration. I think the traditional approach often leads to fragmented visibility or delayed responses. And in today's landscape, where attacks are increasingly sophisticated and span both physical and digital realms, that fragmentation can also become a serious vulnerability. And I
Yeah,
think that's where, unified security approach tackles this challenge.
that's
And
correct.
yeah, and I think that's where we need to continuously learn and adapt as well in the current environment that we are living.
Absolutely. You're
Great. And I think, while there's a unified security architecture and an approach, let's talk about the elephant in the room, that is artificial intelligence. Definitely, we all know AI has emerged as a transformative force across numerous industries. And let's just also, accept to the fact that security is also no exception. The integration of AI into security systems is transforming how businesses, individuals, and even governments protect their assets, people, and facilities. And, with preventive threat detection or advanced surveillance capabilities, AI is not only enhancing efficiency, but it is kind of also redefining the concept of security itself. So, how is AI helping organizations bridge this gap between physical and digital security, and what capabilities are most transformative according to you?
Good question. Yeah. So, Priya, let's assume something like this. Now, your laptop or your desktop or your any of the edge device that you use in a day, let's assume that now the access logs, whatever the applications that you're opening, or maybe whatever the activities that you're doing on your laptop or on your endpoint device, right? So it is actually now creating a close to about 100 MB plus kind of a log size per day. And when you talk about any of your perimeter devices, like within your network, it is like when it might be a firewall, maybe a router, might create invariably between 1 GB to 1.5 GB kind of in a medium sized organization, a kind of an access log size. That means events, number of events that takes place every time a user opens an application or closes an application. So that's a kind of size of the data that we're talking about over here. So it is practically impossible, right? So it's practically impossible for with a manual intervention to identify these terabytes of data when you have a multi branches. A company like Blue Cloud, if you look at it, so with having a huge infrastructure in place, thousands of employees across the world, right, across 8 countries now, and to manually to identify each one of the security events is really a mammoth task, and it would turn out to be an impossible thing. And out of which the most important thing is identifying the TP versus the FP, which is what we call it as a true positive or a false positive versus true positive, right? So this is where the cognitive approach is required. This is where the AI would come in picture, especially in security area, where to bridge that gap to understand and process where the diverse data streams that are coming in, so can be, in a cognitive way, can be classified, identified, and then the actions could be automated. There could be two parts in this. One is the predictive analytics, second is, would be an agentic AI kind of an approach that we could take. In predictive analytics, it will basically relay whatever has happened. It records what has happened. Basing on that, it derives a pattern, and behavioral anomalies would be identified where the credential being compromised, or maybe a digital terminal has been accessed by a physical user if it is out of the building. So these kind of rule sets would be created. Basing on those rule sets, now basically it will try to identify those patterns. Why Vinod is accessing the network at a specific time outside building, right? This can and basing on this, next time at the same time Vinod would be doing this or not, and basing on that, it will derive false positive and true positive kind of a rule sets. So this is where basically the recorded data, whatever the recording, what has happened. So this data based pattern analysis for the predictive analytics would be quite useful. Agentic AI is a transformative capability where autonomously can initiate the defensive protocols. Now you identified that, okay, now there's an exploit. Somebody has tried to scan your network, and with that scanning, they found that there are certain ports which are open. Through those ports, they are trying to reach your web server, or maybe trying to reach your one of the industrial computer which is inside the manufacturing unit, right? So when they identify this, which happens when a hacker gets access to it after that, when security personnel is not available at the desk at the point in time. So, and nobody is able to attend because of the tons of the data that is there. At this point in time, this autonomous method of agentic AI can initiate the defense protocol, can invoke the rules and say that, basing on this, which is actually in a regular pattern, this is how it is supposed to work. And somebody is trying to do a reverse engineering of this. Somebody is trying to come, where the data is expected to go from inside to out. And now somebody is trying to do it in reverse way, right? So this is where it will identify and implement this. Earlier also, we had some kind of platforms like this called SOAR, which is a security orchestration platform, which used to do this. But this one does the agentic AI-based security analytics would basically helpful to do this in an automated way using the artificial intelligence with a cognitive strength. So that's about overview on this bridging gap, Priya.
Definitely, Vinod. And I think, AI is acting as that connective tissue, bringing together data from all, systems, whether it's access controls or sensors, into a one unified intelligence layer. And, what's also interesting is how this conversion is pushing organizations to rethink their security architecture altogether, not as isolated functions, but as an integrated ecosystem where visibility, speed, and context are everything. And of course, with that comes new challenges around data privacy, governance, which makes this evolution even more complex and critical. And I think now it really sets the stage for a broader conversation on how organizations can operationalize this intelligence while still maintaining trust and compliance. Because I think today in a world where, data breaches make headlines almost weekly, and understanding data privacy regulations has become crucial for businesses and consumers alike. In fact, with over 80% of organizations are experiencing some form of unauthorized access in past year alone. So how do you think that organizations can balance the security and privacy ethical considerations while integrating a unified framework?
It's a very important question, Priya, especially when we have recently, because all that we know in India is an IT Act 2000, which is set a regulatory framework and which is defined do's and don'ts, and based on that, we the regulators as well as authorities have evolved the policies and guidelines. Today, we have a DPDP Act kind of a thing, which is in place. Now, this is where how exactly the data privacy, not compromising on the data privacy, how exactly this could be addressed is a big challenge question. So, in my view, or in the philosophy of Blue Cloud, we see that the primary challenges with the interoperability and data volume management, especially with this physical security systems, which runs a proprietary protocol, which cannot talk to the modern stacks that are there. So this can be turned into an intelligence where organizations it's important for the organizations to adopt to the open standards where using the APIs or the cloud first architectures where you have to break the data silos and adapting to this open standards, which is already widely available open standards that are there, and then filtering the at the edge level. So edge AI, that's where Blue Cloud has focused, envisaging what would be the down the line the requirement would be, especially for the a country like India, which is growing the far multiplied pace of it. So we focus on edge AI chip, where processing the data, entire data instead of at a centralized server, doing everything at a camera level. It's using this edge AI chip, where only the outcome results would be sent to the centralized server, and then the centralized server it would become easier for the faster correlation. This is where the data volumes can be managed, and this could be addressed. The first one would be adopting to the open standards, and second one would be reducing the noise and ensuring the security teams can have and high fidelity based actionable alerts that could be brought in into their analysis or assessment.
That's a powerful takeaway, Vinod. And I think in today's hyper-connected world, it's not just about protecting assets anymore. It's about protecting identities, rights, and the integrity of data itself. I think, striking this balance also requires a cultural shift within organizations where, security teams, legal experts, policy action makers, and even leadership should collaborate closely to create frameworks that are not only robust but also fair and inclusive. And that overall, reinforces the idea that trust is the new currency. Because organizations that can successfully align security and privacy as well as ethical responsibility will not only mitigate risks but also position themselves as leaders in a trust driven digital economy. Great. One last question for you, Vinod, is since we have discussed everything about the current landscape of cybersecurity, the conversion of physical and digital security, of course, and how a unified security approach is the way moving forward. How does the future of security architecture looks like in the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure. So addressing the first point that you earlier suggested quickly in a minute, Priya, especially bringing in unified strategy between the governance and culture is importantly you need to have an executive buy-in. So where there should be alignment of a CISO, especially between the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and the Chief Security Officer, who's into physical security. The alignment between these two, which is only possible with the executive buy-in. That's a board level, acceptance. And the cross-functional teams, especially security, is no longer just an IT problem. So IT department will take care of this security issue. That's having said that, now today we have reached to a next level of it. So it's very important to bring in cross-functional teams across this, where identity management, physical access, legal, and data sovereignty, all of this could be brought into one particular umbrella. And majorly, their approach should be kind of a sovereign by design. So especially, it is not just talking about compliance or guidelines, but it's more of like regulators and the acts, the law that has been implemented. The sovereign by design is an approach that we need to take. Coming to the point of future of the security architecture, it's more of like they have to come up with autonomous security ecosystems between physical and digital domains, which should be fully integrated with each other, and where they have to core focus on self-healing infrastructure where the networks and the physical facilities can automatically reconfigure them, which we are already there, right? So whenever through a photo, firmware over the air kind of update that comes to a camera, so it should be able to patch up, and if something goes wrong with that firmware, immediately it should be connected back to the baselines with security baselines that are defined earlier. This is where the self-healing infrastructure would come in picture, where networks and physical facilities can auto reconfigure themselves. And quantum resistance defense. Why quantum resistance defense? Today, encryption earlier was a luxury. It's kind of a word where not very often used to be heard. But today, everywhere you have encryption in place. Now coming in place, especially. So the traditional encryption security architectures are posed to a lot of risks. So this is where the quantum cryptographic algorithms needs to be implemented. So this is where the future of the security infrastructure will be built in a strong way, in a robust way. And pervasive edge intelligence. So implementation, adapting to the technology which has edge intelligence or edge chip, which can give a proper feed to the security operations center. Right, security analysts have got a lot of job to do. So it's very important to provide them now a sanitized data set to them, and AI-driven layer embedded directly with this fabric where it can connect to whether it is the industrial infrastructure, critical industrial infrastructure, smart cities, or government law enforcement agency networks. All of this should be with the edge intelligence powered with the edge intelligence. So that's a context overview that I would give over here, Priya.
Definitely, Vinod, and this shift towards unified cybersecurity platforms marks a crucial evolution in digital security. This approach integrates essential functions into a cohesive framework and a platform that enhances visibility, streamlines operations, and improves response times. It's not just a trend, it's a necessary adaptation to the complexities of modern cyber threats because integrated strategies are now paramount, which are overshadowing traditional solutions. Thank you so much, Vinod, for your time and effort to be on a podcast today and helping us understand that as organizations are navigating the evolving threat landscape, embracing unified cybersecurity platforms is not merely a beneficial choice. It's a strategic imperative. The time to rethink cybersecurity approaches is now, and adopting a unified strategy could be the key to achieving resilience in an increasingly complex digital environment. Thank you so much for your insights, Vinod. It was lovely chatting with you.
Same here, Priya. Thanks a lot to having me here today. Thank you.
Thank you. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around the conversion of physical and digital security, the need for adopting a unified cybersecurity approach, and when visibility, automation, and intelligence converge, security transforms from a cost center into a competitive advantage. And that's the power of a truly unified strategy. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes, and you can view all our previous episodes on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.